Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. That's the first of our episode called CISO Talks. There are many more to come. And just before I go into anything, just you most probably see that we record this session for the simple reason for everyone who is not capable of joining us today, so that we can pretty it up and share it with the wider audience. So once again, thanks so much. And I'm very, very happy that we start our session today with Oz Elashi, the CEO and founder of CyberSafe. And I don't know if you may know him or may have heard about him already, but Oz is the CEO and founder of a company called CyberSafe, behavioral science and data analytics company that builds software for better manage human risk. A former UK Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, and Oz is focused on making society more secure by helping organizations to address the human aspect of cybersecurity. And I could now read forever and ever and ever. I have a long CV, but I think I leave it here. But before I now go into the first question, let me quickly introduce the CISO Talk in general, so what we have in mind, because we hope that all of you and talk about it and may do even more in future, and so that you share and spread the message. So the idea of the CISO Talk is kind of a new webcast series that explores the hidden pressures faced by top-level cybersecurity professionals. So we really want to get the topics which are hot onto the CISO Talk, so that we can exchange and really help everyone to learn and may not do the mistakes which other people have done before. You will hear from entrepreneurs and industry leaders like us about the challenges, stresses, and motivations of those who protect our companies, the critical infrastructure, and all our, at the end, our online lives, right? And from digital extortion to industrial espionage, today's cyber professionals face unexpected challenges, and I think you all know that. And we want to really get the story out there and help everyone to be on top of it and at least hear it before something happens to you. The whole idea of CISO Talk is to be interactive if possible. We would like to encourage questions from all of you. Please put them in the chat if you have anything. And I've started already before to ask some of you a couple of questions, so that we have at least a start. But again, if you feel for it, or you have something which you want to get onto the topic, or get us or my information about it, just feel free to chat to all of us, and we get fun. So Oz, very welcome. Very happy to have you. Let me start with the question which I thought was absolutely amazing. One of the guys asked, Forrester wrote in their last Forrester Wave that traditional cyber training and awareness approaches prove not to work anymore, and that modern culture-focused approaches are required these days to be successful to address the cyber DNA of people. What does this really mean for you? And what is this new wave in your eyes, really?
Ajay, well, thank you very much for having me here. Really great to be here for this CISO Talks series, and also to be on one where we're talking very specifically about the human aspect of cybersecurity. I do think that's a brilliant question, because actually I think the question that has just been asked there is the one that is often thought but not said out loud. Forrester suggested that the traditional approach to security awareness training isn't that effective. And that's a really big statement to make, especially from an organization like Forrester, who speak to thousands and thousands of security leaders, CISOs and other security leaders across organizations across the globe, and of course have been looking at this issue of human risk and security awareness for all of these years. So here's my take on this, and more importantly, here's what I think Forrester are trying to say. If you think about why we address human cyber risk, Andreas, one of the reasons all of us as security professionals, most of us violently agree with each other that you can't ignore people. People are important. People are part of the system. People must be thought through and considered. And ultimately, so many of the successful data breaches and cyber attacks that take place target and play on the people component. We all violently agree with that. But the thing that actually has happened, and if you look back through history, back to the earliest recognized and recorded cyber attacks, best part of 25, 30 years ago, through to the evolution of now the scourge that we would call ransomware and every other form of cyber attack, the people component has played an increasing part. But for some reason, we have, as a community, thought that training people on its own, making sure that people know what to do and understand the answers to important security questions will reduce our risk. The truth is there's no evidence of that. That's a really big statement, but it's true. There is no evidence to suggest that what people know and how they behave are necessarily the same thing. I know that I shouldn't eat as many packets of crisps, as many biscuits, and drink as many cans of Diet Coke as I do, but I do it anyway. Sometimes our reason for our behavior is actually different to our understanding and our knowledge. And the traditional approach to security awareness is focused purely on making sure that people know the right information and get the answer right when they're tested. That is evolving, and that's what Forrester are highlighting. There is a new breed and a new wave of security professionals. It's not actually about the vendor community, it's the security professionals themselves who are responsible for managing the risk, who have started to say, in every other part of my strategy, I look for data to see whether what I'm doing is making any difference. Why would it be different in the people space? And that is shaking up the human cyber risk management space.
That's very, very a good point, right? Because just especially the Coke thing, right? You know, me, the big Coke Zero drinker, and I totally aware that I shouldn't, but I still do it, right? So that's a very, very. But if you're now saying data, you know, if you by moving the discussion towards data, what is success really? What does a successful awareness campaign means? Is it that I've given out whatever toys, tools, had a lot of banners, or what are really the measurement, the metrics I can use to measure that what I'm doing, especially if I'm a senior manager and I look, oh, we spent all this money on these campaigns. What is success really? What defines success and how to measure it in your eyes?
Yeah, so again, I think this is one of the truths, and some of these answers are not necessarily, I don't mean them to sound as much like politicians' answers as they do, but I will be completely open about the perspective and also the research, because we at CyberSafe, we do a lot of research into this particular space, and we see a huge amount of feedback. The truth is, it depends on what you're trying to achieve as a security team. It depends on what you're trying to achieve as a security team. Some security teams, they may not like to say it out loud, but the truth is, all they want to do is tick the box. They have to. They have to tick the box because they need to meet a regulatory requirement, or they need to adhere to a particular framework, or maybe they have pressure from client audits and therefore third-party scrutiny. They are focused and prioritizing ticking the box. And in that case, when it comes to measuring things that help you measure whether you've ticked the box, completion rates is a fantastic thing to measure. How many people have completed the training? How many people maybe reached a pass mark that you wanted to achieve? Remember, in most of our organizations, our people are not stupid. So if you give them some information and then ask them a question on it a few seconds later, most of them will get the answer right. They may not get it right the first time, but they'll eventually get it right. In fact, they're so intelligent that they will find ways to make sure that that thing takes as little time as possible. Click, 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 record, 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 share information, share information. Collectively, let's make sure this doesn't take too much time. They're ticking the box as an organization. Your people have completed it, but ultimately, your people have just done what you asked them to do. I do not want to belittle ticking a box, because there are boxes that need to be ticked. And if you're in a regulated industry, or if you are trying to follow a framework, some of those boxes are actually quite helpful, but in many ways they're also unhelpful. So there's that kind of, what does measurement look like for that group? Ticking a box, completion might be a really good thing to measure. There are also increasing numbers of security professionals who say, I want to do more than tick a box. I want to reduce the risk we carry as an organization. And as we just discussed, Andreas, with the Diet Coke and your Coke Zero, what people do and what people know are different things, but it's what people do that determines how much risk we carry as an organization. So in that sense, the thing to measure are security behaviors. Security behaviors. How do people behave, and how is that behavior influenced by the training and the security awareness activity that you have done. There is one aspect of the industry that has really lent into this, and that's, of course, phishing and phishing simulations. And even though they are simulations and therefore not necessarily wholly helpful, because they really only tell you how people respond to a simulation, not necessarily the complete picture, but at least it's something, then phishing simulations are a metric that people have lent into. But there are more behaviors than just phishing. Even if the thing you're trying to protect against is phishing, there's more for you to look at from a behavior perspective than who clicked, who reported, or who didn't do anything. And that's really all most simulations tell you: who clicked, who reported, who didn't do anything. So behaviors are key. And it's behaviors for me, Andreas, that feel like the most important metric when it comes to measuring risk reduction.
What are typical things? Just out of curiosity, because I think we both had once the discussion about how management leads by example, for example, or how whatever pressure, if I put enough pressure on someone, people start to do things which they would normally do. What are so typical aspects in your eyes there?
Yeah, so again, Andreas, you're right. We've talked about this before, and indeed, as a security leader, when I know that you will have seen this, and our experience is that human beings, incredible organisms, all of us. If you think about the complexity that we can deal with, the challenges, even those that maybe not necessarily as experienced as others, are still able to deliver a level of complexity or deliver against a level of concurrence that is just incredible when you really break it down. If we try to think about it too much, then our minds will explode. We have to take shortcuts as a result. Heuristics are effectively shortcuts that we take that enable us to do things that we shouldn't really think about too much. If we did, we wouldn't get anything done. We would never get out the door of your house in the morning if you thought about it. In the same way that that's a kind of human trait, you also have the human trait that says that actually there are certain things that shape those behaviors, our behaviors. And one of those things, for example, is security and safety. Psychological safety is a term that often people will have heard. Trust is another thing that we know is important. All of these things are important to us as leaders because we realize that depending on the culture we have in our organization, and depending on the way in which we engage with our people, we actually influence their behavior even before we've asked them to do a specific thing. And there are organizations, many organizations, who mean well. They're actually asking their people to do something that is very good, but they're doing it in a way that isn't very good, and they are actually driving a set of behaviors. What behaviors am I talking about? People hiding mistakes. Really good example, and I suspect everybody listening on this call will understand the importance when it comes to information security of us not hiding mistakes. If we know about a mistake or a problem, we can deal with it collectively. We can take precautions. We can warn other people, and we can contain the breach and the vulnerability. But the truth is, if people hide it, then it takes longer for us to get to that. That's a really good example of one of the things that we've seen. And so whether it's phishing simulations or the way messaging is communicated, or indeed the way that people are punished with training or treated like it's training, or the fact that it's just terrible in the first place, all of these things drive people to behave in a way that's not necessarily positive towards the organization or themselves, for that matter.
But are you saying that, if we address or get to a point where we have a cyber safe DNA in people, and so that means addressing more the human side of us, why we do things, that will change the behavior also at work? So, make us privately feeling safe and cyber aware, that will bring a better situation to the enterprise world? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Andreas. I mean, it's exactly what I'm saying. And here's why. There are very few people, and if I use the example of passwords, the scourge of passwords, many of you will be aware of the international community's attempts to try to, and particularly some of the big techcos, reduce our reliance on passwords. But the fact of the matter is, it's still a really key fundamental component of our security architecture today. There are very few people who have good password practice at home and bad password practice in the work. We know this because we have done the research, and not only have we done the research, but many other international academic institutions have done this research. As I said to you, there are security behaviors that we often don't think about, but they are linkages between the behaviors. And for all of us, we have interests, concerns, aspirations in our private lives as well as in our professional lives. And for most of us, there is an overlap between the two. This idea, therefore, of separating people's behaviors, or as security professionals, missing the opportunity to help improve people's behavior in their personal life, where things sometimes make more sense and matter more sometimes, it's a real missed opportunity, given that, like I said, there are very few people who have good password practice at home and bad password practice at work. There's an overlap and a blend, and we can do a lot to bring those together.
One other question which just came in, people are afraid of making mistakes, right? And so normally people tend to do or want to do the right things, but at the same time they're afraid of asking questions or calling a help desk whatsoever. What is that angle then? Does really mean, if you talk about cyber DNA and say the right thing, where should people go to? What is it? How do I learn if I don't just want to read another book or I don't have time? What is this area? How to educate myself?
Yeah, so Andreas, again, you've asked a brilliant question, because you actually brought together a few things. You started it by saying some people are afraid to ask the question, and then as you finished that question, you said, where do people go if they don't have time or they're not sure where to go? And again, I think those are this is all of the same question, but those are three different reasons why somebody might need help. They're afraid, they don't know where to go, they don't have time. Three brilliant reasons, sometimes always found in the same person, sometimes found in different reasons, why people need the support that goes beyond just telling them what to do, training, and hoping they remember it when they need the help later. So what is working effectively? And we're seeing this across, and this is not actually just about what's happening here with the CyberSafe software solution. We're seeing this actually across in organizations. Some organizations have the capability and the resource to try to deliver some of this themselves. Many organizations work with third parties and partners like Cybervape to do this. Most people don't want more training. They want help. That's the truth of it. And so giving them help when they actually need it is key. And overcoming the barrier is really important. In some cases, that's fear. We see organizations have huge amounts of success praising people or reinforcing good behavior. And one of the good behaviors is to go and ask for help if you're not sure of the answer. That's good behavior. As a security team and as a security leader, all of us will put our hands up and ask for that all day, every day, if we could get it. You can overcome fear by helping people see that it is rewarded, it's valued, that they won't get in trouble for it, they're not wasting anybody's time, and they'll get the help really quickly without making them feel stupid, without making them feel like they are incompetent. One of the other things you mentioned was, what about those people who don't know where to go? This is, of course, one that is definitely more about helping people understand more and educating them, but also reminding them. I know how to do most of my 10-year-old son's maths questions, but the truth is I don't do them all the time, and therefore I forget. I need a nudge and a reminder, and then it sparks a trigger, and of course I can help him. It's the same with our people in terms of reminding them where they should go for that support and making it really simple. And then finally, as I mentioned, you touched on time. Some people don't have time. We think that it's really simple. Just go to the internet page through these 7 links, send a message to this person, wait for the response to come back, which may or may not come back quickly. And we think that that is making it easy for people to get help. Most of us in 2022, we're really impatient when it comes to digital issues. We're so used to getting a response through an app, through a service, through a setup, a software solution, or indeed any other solution that gives us instant help, or at least helps us understand that we're going to get that help quite quickly. We need to do the same in security. We need to help people in a much more responsive and timely way.
That's very nice. Before I come, there was just a question, because you talked about pandemic, about phishing before, and you know, the value of it. In your, you know, in the question was, is it still worth, besides the mandatory training, to do phishing? Is there value in doing phishing and phishing simulations?
Yeah, again, I think it's really important that nobody outside your organization ever tells you what you should or shouldn't do and what is or isn't valuable in isolation, given that nobody understands the challenges that your organization faces better than you. So what we do encourage people to do is to be really clear about what they're trying to achieve. We encourage, and indeed, actually, Andreas, for 2.5 years, we have been really proud and honored to be able to bring together an international community that has catalogued every single security behavior and made it really clear to security professionals which behaviors affect which risk outcomes. Why? Because now you can have security teams, and this is all brought together in the Security Behavior Database, or also known as SEBDB. And Cybervate and the help we received from members of the Cybervate team were key, as well as security leaders all around the world for the last 2.5 years. And it's an ongoing open source research project. Now it means that we can, as a community, start with the risk outcomes we're trying to avoid. Identity theft. Work backwards and say, which are the security behaviors, the things that my users can do or shouldn't do that affect that, and then identify which behaviors we need to address. And of course, in many of them, phishing is an absolutely key piece. We know that actually unauthorized access to our networks often starts with phishing attempts on individuals. Social engineering, of which phishing is such a key component. About 30%, if you were to believe the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK. I think most European countries have roughly a similar stat that suggests anything from as related to just phishing. So I would suggest that phishing is definitely something to be considered, but it's something to be considered in multiple different ways. It's not just about phishing simulations, because phishing simulations help you determine who clicked, who didn't click, and who reported. They don't help you determine which of your people are making it easy for the cyber criminals to conduct their reconnaissance because they are posting unnecessary information on social media, or they haven't set their social media privacy settings to the right things. Those are two different security behaviors that directly impact phishing. Or which of your users are using passwords that they're reusing their passwords that they shouldn't be, which helps, because they've been found in a data breach, a cyber criminal convince them in a phishing email that they are somebody more authoritative, i.e. legitimate. Again, something that makes phishing easy, but is more than just who clicks, who reports, and who ignores. So I think that phishing is absolutely important, can't be ignored. Phishing simulations for many organizations have their place, but if you are reliant on phishing simulations and training as a way to reduce risk, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah. But now that you bring it to risk, and Magdalena, I've seen your question as well, but let me do one question before I ask this one. Now that you bring it to the risk side, there was a question before about the standards ISO and NIST, right? Both are super light on human factor. And there's not much guidance for any organization as I look here what to do, what not to do. Is there any hope? Is there anything also what the community can do to really push that and make this a change? Because at the moment, it's just maybe one or the other regulator says, oh yeah, how many, as you said, how many clicked, how many reported, how many have done it again, right? But it's very fundamental. There is no real guidance, obviously, from these standard frameworks.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, and indeed one which, if we were to be critical, we could say that the regulators and the framework editors are not helping us as a community as much as they could help us yet. But I would offer a couple of things. One, it is rare that the regulators and the frameworks editors and authors have been at the front edge of risk reduction. They are normally reacting to the changes and the evolution that is already taking in the marketplace, and maybe codifying it and making it easier for people to understand, or maybe easier certainly for people to follow. So we are already seeing an evolution. Less than 6 or 7 years ago, the guidance was simply to make sure that your people conduct awareness training. Increasingly, whether that's in NIST, whether that is in the financial regulators who are particularly, the financial services sector in particular has unsurprisingly really led the way as far as cybersecurity and cybersecurity practices have been concerned, given the threats and challenges that they have faced since day dot. increasingly we're seeing very much a bit more specific guidance. Make sure that it's role specific training and help that's being given. I noticed this weekend that and I'll get the name of the US provider. I will come back with the details before we finish this call. There was a US organization that was fined recently because, and it was fined £5 million. One of the reasons it was fined £5 million was because they didn't take adequate steps as it related to their security awareness training. They were training their people, but in that particular case, and I think it was the Financial Authority of New York, deemed them not to be taking adequate steps. The question is, what are adequate steps? My people are training. I can show you that they completed all their training, and I can even show you that most of them have scored an acceptable score. The reality is that adequate steps are increasingly including language like are influencing behavior change or security culture. These additions of the odd word do require further definition and further clarity, but it has started. And so organizations who want to reduce risk, as well as tick a box, and remember, I'm not in the camp that says ticking boxes is bad. I'm in the camp that says ticking box on their own is bad. If you can reduce risk and tick a box at the same time, why would you not do that?
Absolutely. And that's why I asked this question for, because now Magdalena's question fits super well into it, because she asked as well, saying, all this stuff we measure and the activities for security awareness, which we may have or can get, how can we use that to demonstrate value towards executive boards, management board, right? So cost efficiency, value of money spent, and all that stuff.
Such a good question, Magdalena. And there's a brilliant chap. He's actually a behavioral scientist. His name is Matt Walliat, and he wrote a book called Start at the End. But it's actually a principle of behavior change, and it's also a principle of, I would suggest, us as security professionals, everything else that we do when it comes to security, but yet for some reason, when it comes to the people component, we've been a bit slow to this. Start at the end. What is it we're trying to achieve? When it comes to helping our execs understand the value of what has been done, we have to show them the value. If all we can show is how many people attended an event, how many people completed training, how many people fell or didn't fall or reported a phishing simulation, we're showing a little bit of value, but we're not showing very much depth of value. If what we can show is, here are the risk outcomes, the risks that we're trying to avoid as an organization. We, the people focused on human risk, haven't made that up. This is a consensus across the security community of the organization, and indeed our security leadership, CISO or otherwise. That team has determined what are the risks we're trying to avoid. And then as a security awareness professional, you do the thing that security awareness professionals are increasingly doing, which is, what are the security behaviors that influence these things we're trying to avoid? And then you then go one step back. Remember what I said, start at the end and work backwards. You then say, what do I need to show that I'm influencing these security behaviors? One of the behaviors in one of our organizations that we work with is getting people to shut down their laptops and their computers, because many of them are still working in hybrid environments or working remotely on a weekend. They need them to shut down because those people who are not logging off and shutting down properly are impacting the patching and the updates that are taking place. It's just not being as effective. That's a security behavior that the organization has already identified because it's tied to the thing. So being able to show how many people have actually taken that on board, following the nudges or the prompts or the training or the webinars or whatever it is you're doing, that is a key metric. There are lots and lots of other examples. How many people have changed the default password on their Wi-Fi router at home? If you've got people working from home, using their personal Wi-Fi, and you know that actually one of the challenges that many organizations are having are people hemorrhaging information because people are accessing insecure connections, that's something that would be really key to do. My point is that there's actually about 80 different security behaviors, but all of them are wrong. Many of them link into the risk outcome you're trying to avoid. Don't try and change too many behaviors at one go. Don't list 80 behaviors, even 20 behaviors to change on the same go. Be really clear. We want to avoid this. We've identified these behaviors. These are the things we're therefore going to measure. And we're going to start with these 3, 4, 5 this quarter. Literally, we are seeing then organizations be able to, and security teams and security awareness professionals be able to demonstrate real value. Not only have people completed their training, not only did we run our phishing simulations, but we got 40% of the organization to move from having never changed its default password on its Wi-Fi router to change the default password on the Wi-Fi router. That has made the organization more secure.
That's a super point. You know, now I have a personal question, because I think we both were at RSA, we both were in London. I have never heard that much or that often a combination of what has happened in the past with what we are doing. So I don't know how often you have seen or heard the word cyber pandemic the last 4 weeks, but I have heard it a lot. And so they're using it now to bring or use the actual COVID thing to get more momentum for what we all try to achieve and get more secure and all that. So how do you see that? Does it make sense? Is this just marketing, or do we really face something, if we're honest, something like a cyber pandemic?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It is really difficult. And apologies, I think I've just received a visitor here. Who
Oh, cool.
hopefully will sit
Join
here.
us. Oh, hello.
You say hello, and then we will just quickly pop her out. There we go. 1 second. Apologies for that. The cyber pandemic. So I'm actually going to turn the question back to you in a second, Andreas, because I'm super keen to hear your thoughts on this. But I think that it's not an unhelpful thing to think about. There is no doubt that there has been an increase in the number of challenges we face as a community as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And there is an argument to say that we have reached pandemic levels, particularly when it comes to things like ransomware, for example, which is now so prevalent. There are so many cases of so many organizations. And if it's not happening to you and your organization, it will definitely be happening to organizations in your supply chain. And ultimately, therefore, that will at some point has the potential to affect you. The fact is that there are things that have been increasing with epic proportions. But I do think we need to be quite careful as a community, because the pandemic brought some really quite clear images and connotations to mind. We lived through it. Many of us went through a period of uncertainty, and indeed some people still are now, and of course a period of real significant loss. People's behaviors were adjusted, and so to a degree you could use it not only to justify more draconian measures, necessarily in some cases, but also to help people understand the importance of what they're doing. But we need to be careful to make sure that that is what we achieve. And if we're not careful with our language, we will sensitize people to something that really is quite important, and we can't afford them to ignore. And I could point at lots of places, maybe even my own country as I am here, to show that there were definitely people, even during the pandemic, who just got fed up with the pandemic. They just said, fine, it's going to get me at some stage. Let's just get it over and done with. And we can't afford that with insecurity. So, and of course, this idea of herd immunity doesn't exist when it comes to security as well. So there are all sorts of things I think we just need to be a little bit careful with, but I understand why it's happened. I'd love to know your thoughts though, Andreas.
Yeah, that was the trigger for me to ask, right? Because one thing which I noticed at RSA is that all of a sudden, all the CISOs have changed too, right? From the past where everyone said, oh, I've never had an incident, I'm very safe, and we have everything under control. Now everyone seems to have it like a trophy, or, you know, I had this incident and I survived it, I managed it. So they, you know, I heard that before, but especially at RSA, it was so everywhere that people say, oh, you know, was this and this, we had this and this incident, and now openly talking about it and making this even as a great achievement, right? And when I then heard a keynote at RSA talking about the cyber pandemic as well, then I said, okay, it's a mindset shift, right? The people start to think different and also act different. So there is obviously more sharing, more willingness to learn. And I think this pandemic is just another thing, hopefully used in the right way, as you said, to get to the point that we openly share and help each other instead of saying being in silos and all that stuff. So therefore, I just thought that I need to ask you that one, because that's such a big change which happens there.
And I think this is a really good thing, Andreas. You know, this is you know, we have all known as a community that organizations were going through challenges and suffering and learning from mistakes. But the key that we need is for us to share that learning, and for us to share the understanding and the insight, and of course for us to spread the net wider to protect more organizations, ideally before they have to go through the same problem themselves. So anything that makes that possible. And you're right, this idea of a pandemic, something that is outside of our control, there's no shame in falling victim to, but we're not complacent about. So we do our best to reduce the chance of falling victim to it. If you do become infected, you take the necessary steps, you look to protect other people, all of those responsibilities. I think in that sense, I actually think that the pandemic can be quite a helpful term. But I, again, also just stress that we need to be careful. And let's be really honest, and I'm a software provider. When it comes to marketing, we do a very good job of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And we need to be careful about that, because actually most non-security leaders, their role is to manage and balance risk all day, every day. So they're super comfortable. So our job is to present the options, present the realities, and of course help them understand the implications of their decisions.
Just follow up, there's just another question which came in, which talks about how to really introduce cyber training into organizations. Or question, or the point which is there, cost efficiency, how to get engagement and keep the engagement going over time, goes pretty much into what you just said. So if you have any tricks and tips to share there, how to do this in the best way.
Well, we're currently actually writing a white paper on this very specifically, how to drive engagement and keep people engaged. Remember, from a CyberSafe perspective, and this is one of the reasons why we enjoy working with CyberVate so much, because our concern is not engagement for engagement's sake. It's engagement in order to influence attitudes and behaviors. And so as far as that is concerned, keeping engagement high is key. But like I said, anybody who thinks that your workforce wants you to give them more training is kidding yourselves. They want help. They want things that are useful, that are relevant, that are contextually relevant, make sense to them in their role or in their personal circumstance, and that actually they can do, they feel like they can do. So in that sense, one of the ways we find most successful for driving engagement is to move and shift from just trying to train people. Here's some information, read it, answer some questions, show us that you remember it and understand, to helping people. Ask them the questions that actually encourages them to answer about the things that matter to you. Here's a little tip. If you ask people yes, no answers, have you changed the default password on your Wi-Fi router? Answer yes or answer no. Guess what? They know probably when you ask that question, that's something they should do. And some will have done it. Many, many more won't have done it. And so you're going to get one of a few things. You're not actually going to get that many people who lie, but you will get some. But you will get some people who say yes. And some of the people who say yes won't be telling the truth, but most of them will. You'll get lots of people who don't answer the question. They're not answering the question because they're going to wait until they've actually done it before they answer the question, because they know they should do it. And why would you answer no to something when you could just wait a little bit longer and then answer it later? But the problem is they won't do it a little bit later. They'll do it much later because we forget, or sometimes our lives are busy and something else of a higher priority comes in. This is what we mean by treating people like people and focusing on behavioral science. We find at CyberSafe that in order to get self-response behavioral event data that is actually accurate and can be used scientifically to optimize interventions, we give people another option. Yes, no, please remind me later. We now get the opportunity to remind them at a time that they want to be reminded. And a really good example was somebody who actually gave us feedback saying once, thank you very much for telling me to change the default password on my Wi-Fi router. This was pre-pandemic. I'm at work reading this. My Wi-Fi router is at home. You have not helped me. And it's a really good point. We gave them the right information at the wrong time. We didn't help them. We tried to train them. Combine it. Your engagement goes through the roof. People can now choose when they want to be reminded of certain information. They get the reminder at the right time. They take the action that is needed, and you get the engagement and the behavior change, and you tick the box, all in the same action.
Let me challenge that. Not really challenging, because if you have kids in school, right? And in schools you do these board games, card games, and just these playful ways to get kids and engaged. And a lot of these more traditional ways of adult education is using exactly these methods as well. Is this helpful? Is this, in your eyes, really achieving the thing, or is this exactly what the Forrester guys are saying? Look, that's not good enough anymore.
So this is where it's really, it really is interesting. So pedagogic theory is what you're describing there. And anybody here who has studied academic or education, especially early stage education, will know much more about this than I, but I do know enough to know that pedagogic theory is absolutely key. And you're right, Andreas, there is no doubt that when it comes to certain behaviors and development issues, and also just general education, the theory delivers the results. But there is a key difference here that I think is so important. One, in most cases, we're not trying to influence children. We're actually trying to influence adults. And in most of our cases, we have a number of other things going on in our lives that children simply don't. They don't have the level of distractions or the requirement to prioritize, or the conflicts that occur through lack of resource, one of those key resources being time, some of course those key resources being energy, etc., etc. So the context is different. The second thing to bear in mind is, in most cases, behavior is shaped by a number of things rather than just one thing. There are very few behaviors that you can influence by helping people understand something on its own. In fact, the behavioral scientists amongst us will be aware that behavior and behavior change is an equilibrium between driving forces and restraining forces. And you need to understand what it is that you might need to do to drive change, as well as what you can do to remove the barriers for the change taking place in the first place. Why are people not doing the thing that we want to do? And again, that is something that's taken into account at pedagogic theory, but it's ultimately much more simplistic at that stage and that level. And then I guess the final thing, as I mentioned, is that understanding isn't the key here. So in school and in education in general, even as children get older, quite often we are moving from wanting them to behave a certain way to wanting to know a certain thing and be able to provide certain answers. Our academic institutions are set up like that. In security, we literally, what people answer should be relatively low down the list compared to what they do. I would take somebody who did the right thing every day, but gave a slightly bad answer when asked the question, over somebody who gave a fantastic answer, but somebody who didn't do the right thing. And for those reasons, I think that the theory is important, but not to be overly played when it comes to security.
Interesting. You know, I just read that you personally get very much involved with the SANS Training Institute in the US. So that's the newest thing. Why are you doing this? Given what you just said, what do you expect from that relationship, and to invest a lot of time and effort, which you don't get paid for, into this sending thing through this SANS Institute?
Yeah, so it's a good question, actually, because, of course, as you say, the SANS Institute, it's a fantastic institute, really well established, really credible, actually security skills and insight and understanding that goes well beyond, of course, the human aspect. They've been doing this for many, many decades. And I'm in particular involved with the bit of it that is focused on human risk. So securing the human, run by Lance Spitzner, and they run a number of summits and conferences. And even though the SANS Institute is a training institute, please, we must remember who they're training. The SANS Institute is training security professionals like us on this call, I suspect most of us. So what they're actually doing is equipping security professionals to go in to their jobs and do their jobs better. They're not just solely encouraging people to provide training to their users, because even the SANS Institute recognizes that it's not about training. In fact, there's a phrase, awareness doesn't equal careness, I think was the way I heard somebody once say it. The SANS Institute recognizes that managing risk is the job, the ultimate job of any security awareness professional or behavior change or security culture professional. There's so many now different terms for these roles, but ultimately the roles are all about managing risk. And so the reason I'm involved with the SANS security awareness community is because it's a community. I told you about the security awareness, the security behavior database, 70B. 2.5 years worth of research, it's still ongoing, and we've engaged with hundreds of security professionals, if not actually maybe even nearly thousands now. It's really important for us to be plugged into these communities of people who are thinking and who own and who live the challenge every single day. The security community is incredible, and there are so many security professionals who have put so much effort into helping us optimize how we use technology to protect our networks, our systems, and our data, how we optimize processes to, again, protect our networks and our systems and our data. But when it comes to the people component, we are lagging behind. As a community, at CyberSafe, our application of behavioral science and data science is held up as if it's new. Yet in wellness tech, my watch tells me to stand up every few minutes if I've been sat down for too long. When I'm going from A to B, I get nudges and prompts from my sat nav, which is now built into my mobile device, that help me get where I need to and take and go the right behaviors. This is not new technology, but it's not been applied to security, and that's what we're doing. And so the SANS security awareness community helps us test these ideas, get feedback, help people be really clear, direct, and that's why our product is really improving as fast as it is.
So you're saying sharing is key, right? We learn from each other, and we only get better together. There was one more question which just came in regarding what we can do to train the management, to get the board and the exec management aware of the topic, supportive, that is not just another risk, not another problem area. Any tips and tricks from your side on that one as a last question?
So this is one of the areas that we see as a key challenge, because when it comes to security culture, leadership and the guidance and the behavior and the interest shown by the organization's leaders will determine, or certainly heavily influence, the culture within the organization. So anything that we can do as those security professionals responsible for the human risk management aspect of the strategy, anything that we can do is really key. At CyberSafe, it's not where we actually spend most of our time. We are focused on general users and user performance, for example, as opposed to developers. And even when it comes to the leadership, so maybe board members or the executive leadership, they use our software platform, but ultimately there are some other things that need to be done. My experience, I'm both on boards, I'm an executive leader in my own organization, I have been in other organizations, and I spend a lot of time with many good friends who are in other organizations. My experience is that it's probably a multitude of things that you need to consider. By all means, make sure that they have walked the walk, they have conducted whatever it is that you're giving your people to do, training, if that's what you're doing, including them maybe in the phishing simulations, if that's what you're doing, providing them access to a tool like CyberSafe, which means that they can get the help and the prompts and the nudges that they need. All of that stuff is good. But I would also consider you, in fact, I would also, encourage you to consider direct engagement, and help these people understand not just the implication for the organization, but actually personalize it for them. Most of them have families. Well, let me rephrase that. Many of them have families, whether that's immediate families or indeed extended families. Many of them have had incidents before, maybe even breaches themselves personally, or indeed at the workplace, or know people who have, and they are all really keen to ensure that the organization reduces risk. And so for those reasons, helping personalize it with stories that make sense and that they would recognize, with maybe getting in external speakers to speak, with standing in front of them and helping them understand that actually there's more to security behaviors than phishing and reporting phishing, and helping them understand why. I gave you a few examples earlier. We see that as really impactful. I would love to say that just give them X software solution and everything will be fine, but that's not true. In particular with that group. That group needs additional focus, but it's worth the effort, because when you have it and you have the support from that group, who are busy people, so you're going to have to be succinct, you're going to have to bring it down, you're going to have to make it really relevant. If you get that support, your whole program will take on a new step.
I totally agree. And these days I'm getting more and more often asked by boards to come in and to just tell them what is going on, what they can do, and if they do enough, and are we good enough, are we spending enough, all this kind of question. I totally agree with you. I guess perfect feedback to also end the session, given that we are here, at least in Switzerland, close to lunchtime. So thank you very, very much for joining me today and for all your valuable insights. And you're the first one which I did this with here on this technology on this approach. So thanks a lot so much. And everyone on the call, we have already planned the next 2 sessions. The one will be exactly today in a month about the cloud security, why traditional security models fail on cloud, what we can there. And there's another one on September 8th where we talk about a third-party vendor risk and dependencies on third parties. So if you liked our session today, and we are learning as we do, right? So therefore, more to come. Happy for you to join, and hopefully see you again. And in addition, if you have any questions now that about what Urs and myself discussed, feel free, reach out to me, reach out to Andy and the team, the CyberWeight team. Happy to do demos, happy to show you what the CyberSafe approach is. And last but not least, if you have any ideas for topics for the future, let us know as well, right? So we planned the first 3. This gets us until September, so that will be most probably one more end of the year. So if there's anything, let us know, and happy to take this on. And thanks to all of you for the questions which came in. So, I had only 3 questions, so now we had many more. So therefore, thanks so much for your time and participation. And then all of you, a wonderful remaining day and a nice week ahead of you. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.